Let's talk about Japan's English classrooms. Because, well, they're in a bit of a crisis. For almost 40 years, this huge reform program has been the poster child for its education system. But behind the curtain, it's all starting to fall apart. So, let's dig in and figure out why.
Think about this. You walk into almost any public school in Japan and you'll find a native English-speaking assistant. I mean, for over 3 decades, this has been the absolute cornerstone of their English education reform. The whole point was to totally shake up how English is taught, and yet, the system is full of cracks. It was such a game-changing idea, so where did it all go wrong?
Okay, so the root of the problem. It's not just one simple thing. It's actually a whole bunch of paradoxes, one after another. The entire system is basically built on goals that fight against each other, and it all starts with how we even define the people who are supposed to lead this big change.
Right, they're called Assistant Language Teachers, or ALTs for short. This whole role kicked off way back in 1987 with the super famous JET program. And the idea? It was actually really simple, but also pretty powerful. Just bring in native speakers, get kids actually talking in English, and, add a little bit of that internationalization flavor to the classroom.
But here's the thing. That simple little 3-letter title, ALT, it's hiding a huge divide. It turns out there isn't just one kind of ALT. Nope, there are actually 2 completely separate worlds, 2 totally different experiences, all living under the exact same job title.
And this is where a really common myth just gets completely shattered. When most people think of an ALT, they picture someone from the JET program, right? Supported by the government, all official. But just look at these numbers. The reality is, the huge majority, we're talking 65 to 70%, are actually hired by private companies.
And this just lays out that divide perfectly. On one side, you've got the JETs. They work directly for the local board of education. That means a stable salary, real benefits, proper training. But on the other side, you have the dispatch ALTs. They work for a private company. Their pay is often way lower. They're on these shaky 1-year contracts, and training, it can be pretty spotty, or sometimes just not there at all. It's literally the same job, but a completely different world.
Yeah, this quote from an ALT really says it all, doesn't it? It just nails the frustration of this 2-tiered system. And all that instability it creates, the high turnover, well, that's the first major crack we're seeing in the whole foundation of this reform.
Okay, so we've got this shaky, unstable ALT system. But that's not all. It's crashing head-on with an even bigger crisis, a nationwide teacher shortage. And guess which subject is getting hit the hardest? Yep, English.
And the numbers here are, well, they're pretty grim. Get this, 1 out of every 3 boards of education in Japan says they're having a hard time finding enough English teachers. And we're not just talking about a few small towns out in the countryside. This is a system-wide problem even in the big cities.
So you gotta ask, why is this happening? Well, just take a look at the workload for a typical Japanese English teacher. It's a lot. They're buried under this mountain of stuff to do. On top of teaching like 18 or more classes a week, they're prepping students for a bunch of different exams, they're running after-school clubs, and they're just drowning in paperwork. It's a total recipe for burnout. It's no surprise that fewer and fewer college grads want to sign up for that.
And this is exactly where that whole ALT problem comes roaring back. Because think about it from the Japanese teacher's perspective. This quote here, "We need colleagues, not visitors," it just hits the nail on the head. With so many ALTs leaving every year, these already overworked teachers have to spend a huge chunk of their time training the new person, who then just leaves a year later. What they really need are stable colleagues, people they can plan lessons with long term. But what the system gives them is a revolving door of temporary visitors.
So let's recap. We've got an unstable system for assistants and an overworked, shrinking force of actual teachers. Now, you'd think the logical next step would be to, fix that broken foundation, right? But instead, a whole new layer of pressure was added from the top down, a massive, high-stakes speaking test.
It's called the ESATJ. And since 2022, basically every junior high student in Tokyo who wants to go to high school has to take this speaking test. Now, on the surface, that sounds amazing, right? A huge step forward. Finally, a real focus on actually speaking English. But, and this is the really crucial part, it's a classic case of putting the cart before the horse. Tokyo rolled out a test for a skill that the system itself isn't built to teach. They're telling students, hey, you need to be great at speaking, without first giving them the teachers, the training, or the smaller class sizes you actually need to practice speaking. And all of this is building towards what some experts are calling a perfect storm that's set to hit around 2027. First, this new teaching method, communicative language teaching, becomes mandatory everywhere. Then, these big speaking tests are probably going to expand beyond just Tokyo, and all those students will pour into high schools that are just completely unprepared for any of it.
I mean, this quote from a teacher in Tokyo just says it all. We're asked to teach like Finland with class sizes like China. It perfectly captures that massive gap between what the policy wants and what's actually possible in the classroom. The goals are amazing, but the reality on the ground, with huge classes and not enough teachers, makes it all feel pretty much impossible.
Okay, so it's pretty clear the system is under some serious strain. It's breaking, but that doesn't mean it's beyond repair. So what would real, actual reform look like? Well, if we want some clues, we can just look at some of Japan's neighbors.
And when you look at places like South Korea and Taiwan, wow, the difference is like night and day. They don't have this system of assistants hired by outside companies. No, they hire foreign educators as licensed professional teachers. You need a teaching license, and you're hired directly by the school. It really makes Japan's whole outsourced model look like the odd one out.
And that really gets us to the absolute heart of the matter. For decades, the focus in Japan has been on the image of internationalization, just having a foreigner in the room, rather than investing in the actual infrastructure of professional teaching. We're talking about the training, the job stability, the things you need for good teaching to actually happen and stick.
So the path forward is pretty clear, even if it's going to be tough. It would mean a huge shift, starting with schools hiring people directly. It means you need actual teaching training, not just any old college degree. It means offering stable contracts for more than 1 year at a time, and creating a real career path for skilled foreigners to become licensed teachers. And maybe most importantly, none of it works if you don't tackle the huge class sizes that make it almost impossible for kids to actually practice speaking.
And all of that leaves us with one big final question. After all these years of relying on this temporary, low-cost assistant model, is Japan finally ready to make the real investment needed to build a system of professional teachers, both Japanese and foreign? Because really, the whole future of English education in the country hangs on that answer.